Reward mechanisms, merit. Remember in the Guardian movie? Merit. Get that badge.
Yeah.
You know, get that badge. Eviscerate your selfhood and get that award. And stop your own processes. Repress. And society suppresses you, but you repress yourself. And so when we talked about the divisions there, yin and yang, eros, logos, Sophia, logos, there's also another one, which is repression, suppression. You repress yourself, and society suppresses you. So there's another two forms, you see. And people get happy with this kind of regression and this conformity. And this kind of conformity is in everything you look at, from the cars now to the houses, the boxes people live in, the foods that they're given to eat, you know, even the so-called and then there's these so-called escapes from it, which is the new cults, the new fashions that people think, oh, that's so much expression of my individuality. Okay, created by who? Benetton and Ralph Polo Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger. They're going to create your image for you now?
Yeah. And
you're claiming to be an individual? Good God, what kind of delusion or poisoning are people under?
Yeah. So this is an art, it seems like, of the controllers, or the social engineers to keep this cage of the inauthentic life, as we talked about, the illusion of freedom and all of that. But this is an art that has been, I guess, developed over, I don't know if we should say millennia or hundreds of years or whatever, to provide you with all the entertainments and things that you can escape into. But this art, as it were, do you think that also connects with the fact that, because we talked about this, about there is no need for the clampdown or the the total annihilation of the population, or a hands-on kind of we actually go to the lengths where you suppress the population through a military action or something like that, because we, in a way, I guess we live in the perfect society for the controllers now, because everything is in place to keep the to sustain the way we live now, right?
Yep. War on consciousness, perception control, perception management, opinion control. The real adroit war. And I'm not saying that people within the power hierarchy don't want to go out and just murder and kill. They've tried that in the past. But we're now in an era in which it's thought control.
Yeah.
It's consensus trance. It's perception management. So much more subtle, forms of control. This is the art. And you're talking, yes, this art of manipulation, this art of... See, the sorcerers have to not only create the cage, create the inauthentic life, they have to sustain it and prolong it. Creating it is one thing, but you create something, somebody else can take it down 5 minutes later. So it's much more than just creating inauthentic life and all these roles and all of this this religious stuff and that's going on in the world. They have to maintain it and update it. This is a whole thing to be continually revamped and made.
Expand it maybe into the areas that you potentially want to go into, or offer you, let's say that you have a need for something and a grassroots movement within society, and they can offer a counter solution to that, revamp, as you say.
Inauthentic forms of freedom. We're talking about inauthentic life. We're talking about the cage of the inauthentic person. Well, can't they then invent an inauthentic version of freedom?
Yeah, definitely.
It's so easy. I mean, people who've checked out the work of Edward Bernays, and the whole manufacturing of consent and the engineering of consent and how you take people's inner desires, you see, and manipulate those. Because remember, if there, I've always said it from day one, if you find that there is something impeding a man's spiritual progress, it is often not his own desire that's the problem. There's obstacles in his way. You got to remove those obstacles. You don't have the choice to re-hardwire the person. You can't instill what's not there. But you do have the right to remove the obstacles on the path in front of that person, or at least make them aware of those obstacles. But there's people who are putting obstacles in the way. They're creating this whole artifice, which is extremely elaborate. If people can just understand that, it's very, very elaborate. And luckily, people I relate with, that talk on the forum or, come to my talks, they are starting to become very aware of just how elaborate this sustenance and maintenance of the lie is. It's very, very, ambient. It takes many forms.
So how about, other forms of we mentioned this a little bit earlier. We have New Age movements, we have yoga, all kinds of religions, things to dive into. I guess that's maybe not as alternatives, but as more escapism, I guess.
Yeah. Well, once you've got this Frankensteinian, desire to enlarge the prison and create all these wonderful new features, more inauthentic forms to maintain and sustain this life of the roles coming. Then, of course, and I'm a believer, you see that a great deal of the New Ageism. I can hardly be a critic of religion and then leave out the New Age movement.
Yeah.
So to me, the New Age movement and certainly Orthodox religion are all part of this. They know that man is searching for meaning. So they create religion to falsely pretend to be giving you that. The New Age movement is part of this. That again, man's craving to have a little bit more diversity, to know himself more. Oh yeah. So the non-self now desires to discover. See, you're in the role. You haven't budged from the role. You haven't budged a smecking inch from the role. But now you want to know what your true self is. Well, they'll manufacture that with all the guru wallas and all the Oriental, mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And with again elements of truth.
Of course,
elements of truth, little spattering of truth here, a little bit of there. It's a 70-30. And then you have this whole Dr. Strangelove, concoction, which is the perfect creation. And I definitely even put yoga into that. I don't see anything healthy in any of that except what I would call is known as hatha yoga, which is sort of like exercises for the body. I'm okay with that, a form of yoga. But I believe that yoga is really technology of the ego. Remember we talked about the fragility of the ego? So the ego is always setting about trying to find some real way of cementing its own nature. The ego's in a million pieces. So one of its primal drives is to cement itself together. It happens in the dark behind our perception, but the ego is ever looking for that perfect cement to rebuild itself. It knows it's in pieces and it wants to get whole again. So what we know as Eastern mysticism, yoga, and I'm mentioning this very clearly because it's not the same as magic, which we're going to talk about later. Restructuring the ego, the fragmented ego, is not the role of magic. Right? It's another form of sorcery. It's another form of technology where something that is broken is now trying to be unbroken. But it doesn't question why it was broken in the first place. So yoga is a sort of super highway or super way of it's like weight training for the mind. Yoga is God, we're weak, we're impotent, let's pump that muscle. Let's get into shape. So it's super toning, That's what yoga is in its lower form. It's a technology of the ego. And in fact, I have a great quote from Mircea Eliade, who was one of the greatest commenters. He was like the Joseph Campbell before the Joseph Campbell. If people haven't heard of Mircea Eliade, they certainly need to. And in his wonderful books, he wrote this. He